Everyone, please mute your mic unless you're speaking. Good evening. I'm Andy Stack, Chair of the City Board of Directors. I would remind everyone that this work session is being live streamed. The agenda and background information is available on our board webpage, and I encourage you to follow along using these documents. Please remember to mute your mic unless you're actually speaking. When you do speak, be courteous to each other. Please state your name so everyone knows who is speaking. Speak clearly and loudly so that everyone can hear you. And for the board members, I will remind you to please use the chat feature because I can't always see you, and especially when someone is presenting. So raising your hand sometimes doesn't work, but chat feature, please. I will introduce each item on the agenda, and what I'm going to do now is take the roll. Jenny.
Present.
Jess.
I'm here.
Renee.
Present.
Janet.
Here.
Nancy.
I'm here.
Alan.
Here.
Milton.
Here.
Lynn.
Here.
Dick.
That's me.
Andy, he's here. And as I said, hopefully Sherry will be able to perhaps join us later if she can make it. Okay, I would now like approval of the agenda. Hopefully you've all seen the agenda, you've all seen the background information. So is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Lynn seconds it. Okay, any objection to the agenda, any changes? No, okay, we'll approve it by unanimous consent there. Thank you. Okay, next would be resident speak out, but we had no residents sign up to speak out tonight. So we will move on to our work session topics. And first off, on the agenda is our new Columbia Association President CEO. Hopefully you remember the last summer, Milton told us that he would be finishing out his term and then stepping down. And so the board started a process. We hired a search firm to help us through the selection of a new president. And we did make a choice. And we chose Ms. Lakey Boyd to be our next CA President CEO. Lakey is a very dynamic and forward-looking individual. She brings a wealth of information, knowledge, and skills to the position. During her career, she's been involved with public, private, and nonprofit. So she brings a lot of experience. She has a focus on transparency and inclusive leadership, and she really enjoys being part of a community. And we are very happy that Lakey was able to join us tonight. And so we're pleased to welcome her. And Lakey, if you'd like to say a few words.
Sure. Thank you, Andy. First, I'm thrilled to be here. Again, very excited about the selection and eagerly putting all the pieces together to make the move. We as a family are very excited. In preparing for this and knowing it's a work session, but an opportunity to kind of have a first introduction, I think that the time is probably better served instead of focusing. I can talk a lot about my experience, and Andy mentioned some of that, but concisely putting together 20 years and technical skills and degrees and certifications. And I think all of that is important and certainly a big component of my experience. I think that focusing on really why this position appealed to me and what I hope to be doing and fulfilling as the role of President CEO is what I wanted to speak more about. So in doing that, I think that first and foremost, and Andy hit on it, community is a very big driver for me, and it's very personal. It has a lot to do with my personal background and the way I grew up with not a lot of family support, and actually found a lot of my connection to opportunity and figuring out how to change my own life for the better through community relationships. And that is something that stuck with me as I went on to college and then graduate school, and then added the elements of city planning. And while a lot of that is about changing behaviors and driving behavior, and it can be design or it can be economic, I think at the end of the day, what I'm most interested in is how those connections happen. And some of that is through the actual built environment. And Rouse, studied him in graduate school, and Columbia in particular is kind of the classic master plan community. Certainly so much of the design was put in, but it was really the values that I think were invested and imbued into Columbia that were so appealing and clearly alive and well today, more than 50 years later. So the appeal for me in making the move and pursuing this position really was about the opportunity to be in a community that was starting from a point of having so many of the right pieces, and everyone across America is, or should be, really thinking through, what do we do now after the pandemic? What is the impact then? What are our values? Have they just strengthened what we were already doing? Has it distilled? Has it changed? Has it transformed? And I think everyone that has been engaged over this past year, whether it be from your living room, certainly has had to figure that out for themselves personally. And as somebody that has worked in operations over that past year, many, many hard choices and many, many changing pieces of the board. And what I know about change is that when someone does it to you, which is what happened to all of us in the pandemic, it can be a lot harder to figure out the next steps. So I think we're now really, as spring is happening, getting into that. And that is what I'm most excited about for Columbia. I'm excited that there's so much discussion that's going around this board election. I think the timing of coming in at this time is particularly interesting to me to figure out what is the next normal. I am a strong believer that we're not going back to a normal. That normal didn't work for a lot of us. And we really, what is the next iteration? What is Columbia tomorrow? And that was really strong in the materials around the job description, and as Andy alluded to, a very rigorous process for the selection. And as I went through each step, I think I was more and more interested in what Columbia was willing to be asking of themselves, willing to be thinking about for the future, and kept returning to one of the Rouse phrases that really resonates with me about being a garden for the growing of people. And I'm a believer in we can always be doing better, whatever that is. So growing towards better and being willing to share that path, I think, is really important. So for me, as I kind of move through that, I think it's important to share from a personal standpoint, accessibility, as was mentioned, transparency, inclusivity, those are all important to me. I think a big part of that is just being in the community and part of the community. So it was a requirement, and that was asked early on about the move. And my answer was, I couldn't imagine being a leader in the community and not being in the community. I think that's the way that you actually engage and understand on a much deeper level. My family is thrilled to be making the move. We kind of had come to that decision as the pandemic kind of onset. So I have a daughter who's in middle school. So we are right in the sweet spot of the family life, and she is super pumped for all of the recreational opportunities that abound in Columbia. And also my husband, who is an urban designer, and certainly the location being really right between Baltimore and DC, and given our professional networks, a lot of former colleagues there. So we're super excited. We actually have some friends that have also transplanted to the area. So really thrilled about that and figuring out which village and starting to connect to all of the village centers, and really excited about the local businesses. So on that note, I think that's really a piece of the puzzle for me, that engagement around the 10 villages, but then drilling even past that into really residents having kind of that, what is the portal today? How can we do that engagement? What is the best way to engage? And making sure we're diversifying those opportunities and thinking about different and new ways to be doing it. I think beyond that, certainly understanding and engaging with the businesses and then all the partner organizations. Howard County being a prime one, in my view. I have served in local government, have managed operations and infrastructure, and understand how important those regulations and ordinances and processes are to understand and engage in, and really be a creative partner in, and have had success there, and I'm excited about doing that going forward in Columbia. I think the last thing I'll say, kind of to wrap, is for me, probably one of the biggest pieces that is appealing to me and what I'm very excited about is what I see as the competitive advantage for Columbia to really come out with all of these questions we're already asking ourselves, that we're willing to put the time in, that we're willing to have engagement around, really becomes a competitive advantage for what is Columbia in the future, and really revisiting what those Rouse principles are and how they manifest and translate in today's world. And I'm really hopeful to become a leader as a community across the nation of really innovative and progressive ideas, and implementing those and testing them and piloting them and figuring out partnerships to keep moving them forward. So I will be in Columbia May 1st, and very excited to start to engage. I know that some folks might watch this after we actually are live tonight. I want to say, as you see me out and about in the community, please approach me. I welcome it. I want to engage. I can tell you right now, I ask a lot of questions. It's going to be what's working, what's not, what should we be doing, what can you help us do, all those kind of pieces of the puzzle. And as I close, I will say that obviously, while I might be from the South, my family is not all Southern. Interestingly, my in-laws are actually Canadian. So we go to Canada every summer to visit. And my husband and I had our 15th wedding anniversary this year during the pandemic, and did not get to do our we do a 5-year rotation of big international trips. So we're excited about doing that and doing it from Columbia, and really bringing kind of those values of diversity and perspective. And I might talk a little slower than some folks, but I think really fast. So I think that's something that you'll learn about me. But please say hello. I will eagerly introduce myself to lots of folks as we're out and about. And I'm so excited about being there, excited about the selection, particularly at this moment in time for Columbia. So thank you.
Thank you, Lakey. And we will look forward to seeing you in May. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now. Next item is the Reserve Fund Policy Program. Milton, is there anything you'd like to start with?
Well, the board members and everyone received a revised copy. We, Susan, Lynn, Jackie, all of us put our heads together, and you saw the revised copy with the track changes shown. And so I hope everyone had an opportunity to review those changes. And we really took a listen to what the board was saying. One of the things that is very important there is that we tried to change the title that's more descriptive of what exactly we're looking at with this new, what is now called an emergency cash reserve fund. our emergency cash reserves. And so, Susan, Len, I know that you put a lot of time in the revisions also.
So thank you, Milton. I'll pull it up on my screen here so you can see it if it's perhaps easier. Just take a second. Hopefully you can see it, right? Yeah. So I listened to the discussion at the last work session, tried to, as Milton said, made the name more descriptive. Also reduced the initial target to the $2 million, hearing, I think, a lot of discomfort with the higher target, and also spreading it out over another year to meet the target reserve. So just to make it also easier on the organization. So did you have any questions that anyone would like to bring up?
Yes,
Question, Susan?
I had a question, Andy. I was just curious the rationale. I mean, so I understand what you're saying about there clearly was some discomfort from some board members on the 5 million. I'm wondering how we arrived at 2 million.
So I just shrunk the amount of cash on hand initially, and I just did the 2 million, made the target what the board had set in the budget process back in July. So that's all, just to make that match what seemed to be the comfort level previously.
And are you personally comfortable with that level?
I am for this year, as long as the real question is do we believe that these are the risks and that these are the, is this the exposure? And I do believe that. So I think as long as we make some good progress toward this, I didn't want to back off on any of the others, like the declining property values, the non-renewal of the line. I think that needs to stay on there, and the insured risk, uninsured legal expense. I did slow that down. So, yeah, I can live with this.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Susan? Renee?
I'm not, yeah, so if I look at the numbers are what they are, but I guess my question is, I'm looking at them kind of in an abstract fashion, because what I don't know is what would be covered by insurance. So if we had a tornado cut through Columbia and it took down the Supreme Sports Club and did other damage, what would be covered by insurance? What would be our deductible? What would be our long-term cash output? What would be our lost income? Do you understand my question? I've always thought of a tornado rather than COVID or a massive fire, because we have had fires along 95. And so if I look at something like that, because we've had 2 tornadoes in 4 years, right? What would be my exposure? And what would be covered by insurance?
So the exposure on the property side is not that significant. We have a $10,000 deductible.
Okay.
A windstorm is covered, is a covered event. That would be we have the insured values are at our estimate of replacement cost. And then there's business interruption coverage that would kick in from physical damage. So what I think the uninsured legal issues or the exposure is there are for things like an employment practices claim that would be from some behavior that wouldn't be insured, a D&O claim that the carrier would deny for some behavior that wouldn't be covered, and cyber, I think, are the exposures that that's what I used. And so I took all of the excess amounts thinking that are benchmarked. So those are the amounts of coverage we're supposed to have according to the community. And that would be 19.5, that's the total there, the 19,500,000. And then what's the impact and the likelihood of that, that exposure. So So I don't think the properties where the big, now flood, because floods aren't covered to the same level, but, not a lot of the communities in a floodplain, so.
Okay, so,
That's what
all
I
right,
was thinking.
so then if cyber's where the risk is, what happens if there's a cyber attack on our IT department? What's the loss there?
Let me see if I can get the deductible.
I mean, because even if we have a deductible, we've got to get up and running before we're paid. And then we'll be repaid. So how does that work? What would it cost us to get up and running while we fuss with the insurance company?
Yeah, it wouldn't cost that much because most of what we have is in the cloud. So it's not like a hardware issue, and there's the backup. So our deductible on cyber is $25,000. We have $5 million of coverage. The exposure there is, it would be for something that would not be covered. But this is pretty good coverage. So I'd have to dig into that more. If you'd like me to dig into some scenarios that might not be covered, I could do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think because, I mean, I could be wrong, but I guess my question is, what isn't covered? And are we covering those exposures in putting together these numbers? I
So
mean,
that
we can
right.
mush the numbers any way you want. I can get to the same number, but my question is, if we had one of those uncovered exposures, or better yet with cyber, if we had to front some money for some time period, even 90 days to get up and running while we negotiated with the insurance company, do we have ample cash set aside to do that? That's really my question.
Right. So that's exactly what the analysis that we did to come to this conclusion for these numbers. So if you would like me to break that down, I could do that, but I can't do that right this minute. But that's exactly the line of thought that we followed.
Yeah, if you could send that to me, that would be great.
Okay.
Alan?
Yeah, thanks. First, I want to thank you, Susan and Lynn, for spending some time the other day. That was very helpful. Getting your problem student up to speed. I guess what I'm wondering is, I mean, D&O and employment practices, I don't know how much flood insurance costs, or all these things seem to be things that we can buy insurance for, or maybe already have insurance. So I guess help me understand the benefit of putting a bunch of cash aside rather than buying insurance.
So we do have insurance for all of these matters. This amount is what where we estimate we would have issues for events that would not be covered by insurance. So we have, let's see, $7 million in employment practices liability coverage. But there are things that happen that are not covered by that insurance. And so in that 12.5 million is the amount of cover is 7 million, thinking that that's our exposure because we are benchmarking that coverage. That's what is expected, for organizations our size and type to have. So and it's a small amount, you see if we, so because we think the likelihood is small, it's only 10%, but if it happened, it would have a big impact because these claims are large. This represents what wouldn't be covered either by some negligence on CA's part, by some behavior that would not be considered a covered act by the carrier, or really those are the two main issues. So.
Okay, so am I correct or incorrect in believing that insurance is a matter of, if you may have to pay a lot, but you can get insurance for almost anything? So when you say things aren't covered, they may not be covered by our current policy, But theoretically, couldn't we buy insurance that would cover all the things that you think we're not covered for now?
No, no. If there's a willful acts or negligence would never be covered by any policy.
And in the 50 years that we've been around, besides cyber, which is newer, have we ever had a loss from any of these
That was not
that
insured?
was not insured?
I'd have to look back. I can't say no. I need to look back.
But nothing comes
And
to mind.
that's why the likelihood I had it only 10%. So I don't think it's highly likely, but there is, I'm in doing this from a due diligence standpoint,
Right.
there is some exposure.
I mean, 10%, I think, if I understand what percentages means that one would expect it to happen once every 10 years.
Right.
You've been around longer than that, so if it hasn't happened on your watch.
Well, that's I don't want to say that. That's what I'm not comfortable saying. I can't say for certain that hasn't happened on my watch. So
Okay, but there's not been a maybe. It's not like there's something in your mind. So, oh my God, we gotta protect ourselves against that happening again in some way.
I really don't want to. I can't say that for sure. So I feel there's a matter in my mind that I need to double check. That was not insignificant. So.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Milton and then Janet.
Yes, also for me, and to briefly address Alan's point, yes, we diligently look for insurance to cover any risk assessment that we do. And wherever we can find the insurance, we pursue it, understanding we can have deductibles. But one of my biggest concerns coming into this, and it's just not something new this year, I just think that the pandemic made it more apparent and obvious to us, is that whether we are a $56 million organization or an $85 million organization, which we were roughly 2 fiscal years ago, we have no cash reserves. We have no emergency. We just basically, we're almost sending a message that whatever we take in, we spend. If we had an extraordinary circumstance, we would have to tap our line of credit. And to me, that's just not good business practices. And so that's my biggest concern. Am I comfortable with $2 million? It's a starting point. But I hope that 2 years from now, it still does not sit at $2 million, because as I've said before, we're going to get back to being an $85 million organization. And we should have cash reserves just for extraordinary circumstances where we wouldn't have to borrow.
May I add something to that? I'd like to clarify something that I think might help you, Alan. So the other thing that has happened just over the past 3 years is the increase in deductibles that we have had no control over. For example, our employment practices liability, the deductible in FY19 was $75,000. Last year it was $200,000, and we do not have any control over that. The D&O was 25, and now it's 75. And I will be shocked if I can get coverage this year with a deductible of $75,000. So that's also part of the exposures. These deductibles are just going up and are completely outside of our control.
Janet, and then Alan again. Janet?
Yeah, I wanted to echo what Milton said. I agree that our cash reserves are not adequate for an organization this size, and I feel like there are some things that we can get insurance for, but COVID is a perfect example of something that we cannot have insurance for. And so, I would also like to mention that we have two options here. Right now, we operate under the expectation that we borrow until we get our assessment dollars in. And we would have the option to bring in the assessment dollars and then spend from there without having to have a line of credit. I know that rates have been favorable, so I think financially that has been in our best interest recently, but we can't assume that rates will always be favorable. And so we should be poised, one, to make sure that we are covered regardless of what is or isn't covered by insurance. Two, I think that we have the option to be a more cash-based organization. And, there are certainly pros and cons to that. So I think it would be important to investigate that. But then three, I really, quite honestly, 2 million to me seems like not enough. I was much more comfortable with the 5 million. And so I respect, the organization's comfort level with the 2 million. So if that's the majority, I would go with that. But quite honestly, me personally, I would go with a higher level than that to start.
Alan?
Yeah, thanks. I just, speaking to the board, want to make sure that next time the question of village reserve funds and village's ability to retain cash comes up, that we remember that reserve funds are important and that we probably shouldn't deny them that.
Okay, anyone else? Any other questions for Susan on our emergency cash reserves? This is on the agenda for our April 22nd meeting for a vote. So there will be prepared.
Yeah, Andy, I would just point out, Alan, in the backup, there's a chart that shows the village's average cash reserves, and it's on a percentage basis significantly greater than what we're proposing. So.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move now on. Thank you, Susan. Capital improvement plan. Milton, anything you'd like to start with?
I'm going to turn it over to Dennis. Dennis put a lot of information in front of you, and it's a very, you're talking about dollars. Those are frightening dollars amounts.
Thank you, Milton.
Okay, Dennis, welcome.
Thank you. So to start with, this was, of course, a very, very difficult process. It's a lot easier to do when you have money, more money. And so the capital dollars aren't there that were there prior to COVID. And this is a living document that gets adjusted over time and takes into consideration COVID, takes into consideration changes in our asset base if we pick up or perhaps lose an asset. It also takes into consideration things such as, for instance, we've turned 10 ponds over to the county for structural maintenance. We're working on 2 more, so it takes into consideration that. But it's a component of the economic model that's a planning tool for the board. It's projects over 100,000. It's a 10-year projection. It highlights the cost to maintain existing assets, and individual projects are budgeted in today's dollars, but there is an inflation factor that starts in FY23. Now, what this is not is an approved capital budget. So you have approved the FY22 capital budget, and this is a tool for the board to use on a biannual basis or biennial basis, and it's about needs. And so it's really hard to work through, we had a $17 million capital budget for FY23, and we don't have that for FY23 going forward. So so really trying to hone in on what the needs are so the board can make a decision. We had outside consultants look at facilities, we had in-house consultants, we did asset management plans, board of directors directives. All those factors were taken into consideration, but this is really a planning tool for the board. I want to emphasize it's not an approved budget. And so what I could do is just, so you have the 10-year CIP in total, and you've seen this, and this was sent out last week. What I'd like to do is work through each of the departments and highlight some of the major expenditures, starting with community associations. Oops. So FY23, there's money in it for Stonehouse, $1.65 million. That's in addition to $850,000 that's sitting in the capital budget, which is $2.5 million that will be available for that project. So, and I feel like that's a need, and we fit that into the budget. Oakland Manor HVAC renovation, Owen Brown Community Center HVAC, Stonehouse building exterior in FY25. It's a planning tool. The Oakland Manor elevator, and I know that has been pushed back and people are shaking their heads, but that has been pushed back a couple times, but that's a need, and we're going to have to do it eventually. I'd like to do it sooner, but that's when we can fit it in. Linden Hall ADA restroom renovation in FY28. Community services in FY24, $1 million for the Arts Center renovation, which I don't know how many of you have been in the Arts Center, but Stonehouse needs to be renovated, and so does the Arts Center as well. Teen Center major renovation. art center building exterior, and that's all dependent on what the county does with their village area there. Now, a big one is the headquarters possible purchase, and that, of course, is a maybe, but that drives that number up. And I see Renee's eyes are, but in any event, that's only this is a planning tool. Headquarters lobby renovation, and some money in there for the horse center. Sport and fitness. Now, we pushed back in order to make the FY23 budget work. We pushed back work at the Columbia Gym from FY21 and 22 to FY24 and FY25. We pushed back some money at golf from Fairway Hills from FY23 to FY25. Pushed back the swim center wading pool renovation from FY24 to FY28. And again, this is about needs and about the money that is available. So in FY23, there is some pond dredging and stream work at Fairway Hills. Now, of course, in the open space, we've been planning for them on a regular basis, but this is a new addition to the capital improvement plan. And there's, of course, they have their own ponds and stream stabilization, work at the ice rink, swim center, dehumidification unit, and golf course bridge replacements. Now, they have bridges there just like we have in open space for the golf course. Columbia Gym renovations pushed back to FY24, Hobson Golf Course, pond dredging, stream stabilization, bridge, and Supreme Sports Club Phase 2 renovation. FY25, and I'm not going to take a lot of time on each of these individually because as we move into out years, the numbers become more almost philosophical and theoretical in terms of and not exactly what we spent in those years. But there are significant amounts of money that are projected to be spent in sport and fitness. And open space, so that runs around $4 million a year. So there's an ongoing commitment to the open space. And that's for things such as pathways, bridges, tot lots, water quality, Lake Elkhorn Pavilion, parking lots. The list really goes on. And most of those assets, really almost all those assets are very heavily used. And we've turned 10 ponds over to the county for structural maintenance. I'm working on 2 more. And that's pretty much going to wrap up all the ponds that CA can turn over to the county. A lot of ponds were already in the county inventory. This capital improvement plan also takes into consideration that I believe the county is now responsible for the portions of the overpass that are over the road right of way, and which is a significant cost savings to the Columbia Association. And so I cut in half what we had projected for Columbia Road and Harper's Farm Road, which we're still planning to address. But that runs around $4 million. And I know it doesn't look that way, or look like it, but the number does get reduced by the assets that are turned over to the county. And so we had overpasses that we've just worked on, and then I'm going to move on to underpasses. So I'm sure they're going to be looking forward to seeing me down at the county. Information technology, there's $100,000 in. That was a number I got from Chuck. So recurring category 1 and 2, these are things like the going green money, the building energy retrofits, sport and fitness upgrades, equipment, vehicles, and such. And I might add that, so it's a living document, and we have money in the open space budget for a new fuel site. And of course, thinking ahead, we don't need a 20-year fuel site for probably what's not going to be more than 10 years left on internal combustion engines. So we need to rethink that and possibly outsource gas and diesel in the short term. And fuel sites have a defined lifespan, and we're pretty close to the end of the lifespan for our existing fuel site. But that might be okay because we're going to start moving to electric, I think, in the relatively near term. Category 3 stays fairly consistent, and I didn't put all the years in there, but that also not also, but that is dependent on the overall capital budget. So that number stays fairly consistent. I also put together, and it's 17 pages. I put together a narrative to go with the capital improvement plan. And that narrative is each facility individually, the year built, existing condition, and kind of the facility assessment work that was done to help create the capital improvement plan. And I can send that out, but it's 17 pages. It's I think, incredibly well done. We have a picture of each facility, things like the size of the main pool, and all the details, like a quick overview of each of the Columbia Association assets that you can look at and see what's what. So I'm back to the start. Are there any questions?
Andy?
Any questions for?
Yeah,
Oh,
Andy.
okay, Ginny, don't forget to use the
Yeah.
pencil, but Ginny and then Alan.
Yeah, Dennis, as you know, from the first year I got on the board, I had a concern about why CA was responsible for overpasses. To me, they're a safety issue and not really a Columbia Association. We should be turning them over to the county if, in fact, the county even wants them. If they don't, I don't know why we would be spending what is considerable amount of money doing repairs for them.
I agree, and I've had 3 meetings with the director of Department of Public Works, and I'm not sure that they want them, but they have them.
What do you mean they have them?
Well, there's no, we can't find the county, neither CA nor the county can find any documentation that extends CA's maintenance responsibilities beyond the property line. So over the road right away, CA has maintained them for 40 years,
right?
But digging deeply into it, and the county is digging very deeply. They're looking very hard. And they, in fact, said, well, you've maintained them all this time. Why wouldn't you maintain them going forward? But the fact of the matter is, we haven't been able to find any documentation. But that's a decision for the county because there's some relatively big dollars, certainly big dollars to CA. I'm not sure how they would fit into the county budget, but that's a question for the county. If the county says, look, we're not going to keep maintaining these, we don't think they're useful, then CA would walk away from both sides and the pedestrian access on both sides. I don't think that's the case. Certainly not for the one on Cedar Lane that services the school. I think that's very, very important to the school there. And I feel the same way about the Columbia Road overpass. Very important to Running Brook.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So really, Dennis, the reason they were built is in the original days of Columbia, CA took on a lot of responsibilities like firehouses, libraries, overpasses that frankly should have been done by the county and would never have been done. So Rouse did that. But I guess I'm glad to hear that you're getting legal opinions now that are saying may not be responsible. What I'm trying to figure out is if you say we're not, and it starts to disintegrate, who's going to have the liabilities for that falling on cars, et cetera? You're working on that, I assume.
Well, I sent the county a note with legal advice on, not a note, I sent them a letter letting them know that CA would no longer take responsibility for the portion of the overpass over the road right of way.
Okay.
Exactly thinking what you're, because again, I don't want something to fall on a car, truck, or.
Right. And we'd be liable for it. So we could actually then perhaps close the entrances if we felt the part that's the county is unsafe and they're not, and then they haven't taken it over. We would have to close then both sides. Exit.
We would do that, but we have a recent engineering evaluation of all 3 overpasses, and they're all in pretty good shape. They need some cosmetic work.
Okay.
But we didn't find anything that would cause them to be shut down or need immediate repair. And the county actually, they may be reluctant, but they have been good about stepping up.
Oh, great. Okay, well, thank you. Congratulations, because this could save considerable dollars to CA lien payers. Thank you so much.
Alan?
Yeah, following up on Ginny's point, wasn't there, did I miss something or mishear something? Wasn't in one of the numbers you went over something for overpass repairs or replacement or something?
Yeah, we have money in the budget for Harpers Farm Road and for Columbia Road, but not for Cedar Lane right now.
And do we think that the Harpers Farm Road one, for example, is our responsibility, or do we think it's the county's responsibility?
So we can't find any evidence, and the county has not been able to produce any evidence that CA is responsible for maintenance as it passes over the property line from private property to public property. And I made the argument that it's no different than a sewer line. Once it leaves private property, it becomes a public sewer. So they're looking, but they have not found anything.
So potentially, am I understanding you correctly then, that potentially the money that we have, or you have sort of in your estimator here, might not be something we have to spend because it would be the county's responsibility?
Well, no, I already reduced it. I already anticipated that based on what we found out today. I've been working with them. Jeremy does a really good job with the energy. If I don't move enough. But so now I've been working with them since December 20th. It's now April 8th. And during that, and so we have not found anything in that time period. So I reduced the money that we had in for both of those overpasses.
Got it. So that's actually Dan working with Jeremy, making you do some exercise to.
Well, there's a treadmill. You can't see, but I wasn't running fast enough to keep the lights on.
Got it. One last question. These sort of drop-down mini spreadsheets, as you click down the different numbers, are those numbers all in that multi-page spreadsheet that was in our packet, or are those numbers that drill down into some numbers that are in our packet?
So they're all in the multi-page Excel spreadsheet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Dennis? Well, Dennis, thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to maneuver my computer.
Oh, all right. Sorry. Renee?
Yes, well, technology and I don't get along. So I'm just trying to understand your spreadsheet a little bit. Did someone look at the pools, the outdoor pools?
Yes, the pools are in there.
Yeah, but so whoops. They're not going to need any rehab work for the next 10 years?
So there's category 3 money for the pools, which covers most of that. Let's say they have a tile band that needs to be replaced, or they get a fairly significant portion of the category 3 allocation. And so that's covered under the category 3 allocation for them. Now there's also some work. There is money in an out year for McGill's Common in an out year. And I think there's money further out for Clemens Crossing. So the bigger projects, like McGill's Common and Clemens, are listed separately, but I don't want to call them day to day, but every year, Phelps Luck this year I think has a problem with the beam around the pool, the concrete around the pool, and that's getting done out of the category 3 allocation. That's pretty typical.
Okay, all right, and then the tot lots, are they in here? Or are you just? I'm looking at just trying to figure out. I mean, I appreciate all the work you've done, but what I really don't know is what is the deferred maintenance year to year. So I see that you picked things to be fixed, but what's being deferred?
So the tot lots are in here, but the tot lots are in at kind of a revised program. So we're moving away from wooden play structures to metal play structures, and they're less expensive and have a longer lifespan. So what's in here is the metal play structures that are less expensive. Now, an example, what's not in here is there's a tot lot at 6 pence, and probably not many people here have been there, but the tot lot at 6 pence, for some reason, it was engineered with poles, and it's an incredible tot lot, but I'm not sure how it got to where it is today. It got to 200,000 somehow when it shouldn't. It's a really nice location. I love it, and I like all the tot lots, and so and we have funding in there for the tot lot program that includes the new metal play structures, but not to replace that back in kind. And I think I've said this in the past. We have a tendency to supersize our assets, and we they keep growing, and that was on us because we kept growing them, and we had money. We just kept growing them. Well, that's not sustainable over the long term.
Right.
So what's in here is the tot lot program, but it's not the supersized tot lot program.
Okay, and one last question, and I know Jess has some questions. The neighborhood centers, several of them seem to be older and in disrepair, and I'm looking at the list and I see a lot of dashes, but I don't see money in there for rehab work.
So there is money in there for rehab work out of the Category 3 allocation.
Okay, but does that, if we have, I don't know, I'm looking at this list, I don't know most of these neighborhood centers because they're not in River Hill. So if I have one of the neighborhood centers that's, for example, in Long Reach, that's in disrepair, it's going to be replaced or upgraded under Category 3, but there's no way, like, I guess I'm a little bit concerned that I don't know, I'm coming back to, I don't know what's not being fixed. And do you understand where I'm coming from? I appreciate all this work, but I mean, you can say, okay, it's in Category 3, but then I don't know which, do you understand why I'm confused and why I'm concerned?
I understand your question, and I can put together a list of, like, Locust Park is coming out of Category 3 in FY 22. Mm-hmm. So I can put together a list of those things to make that easier for you to understand.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
I don't think, in my head, certainly, the Columbia Gym is not going to be renovated as quickly as it would otherwise have been if there was no COVID.
Right.
But that's not really, that's a need to keep that facility relevant, but it's not a need because of deferred maintenance. Locust Park is a deferred maintenance need.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to get my hands around. What is the deferred maintenance in CA? It's got to be huge. I mean, we haven't done anything for 2 years by the end of COVID, or not much. Let me use the word not much. So what is that deferred maintenance number? And then, as a board, do we have to look at, what are we going to do with that number? Do we start, we're going to start saying, is it worth keeping this property? Are we going to renovate this property? What does this property mean to our residents? And I guess I just feel like I need to start thinking about those questions sooner rather than later.
So I have to understand deferred maintenance, because take a facility like Stonehouse. And Stonehouse is structurally sound, the roof doesn't leak, the HVAC, but it needs to be updated. And that's different than, so we haven't, if I'm thinking about this the same way, I'm not sure, and we're catching up on some tot lots that were closed. So I'm not sure there's deferred upgrades, which is different than deferred maintenance.
And if it's cosmetic, I'm not worried about it as much. But for example, I was under the impression that there are neighborhood centers that are several years old that have deferred maintenance. Is that not true? Or am I misunderstanding?
HVAC works, and we heard from the people that use the neighborhood centers. They were very happy. I didn't hear one person say that they didn't like the condition.
I'm not complaining. I'm trying to understand.
I understand, but I don't know that there's deferred improvements, but there's not deferred maintenance.
Okay, that helps me out a lot, because that's not what people were trying to tell me. So that helps me a lot. Thank you.
Okay, Jess, and then Alan. Jess?
Yeah, I don't want to get in the weeds, but I wanted to understand what you were saying, Dennis, about the 6 pence tot lot and how that's different than what you were talking about for replacing with the metal tot lots. I got lost there in that, and as you know, people are going to ask me about it.
So we're going to make a presentation to the Hickory Ridge Village Board, and we have a plan.
Great.
And it shows, and we've done a couple of these tot lots with the metal play structures. They turned out great. Actually, there'll be one later in my presentation on open space. They look terrific. They're very they're flexible. They have more features than the wood structures. So we're going to meet with the Hickory Ridge Village Board, set that up for sometime early summer, and but you'll see a picture of something something like what I'm thinking about in the open space update.
Okay. And if you want a little more history on that, I can probably fill you in between me and Joan because, and I think it was 2014, it was a whole thing under Dennis Ellis. So, okay, that was really my question.
Okay.
Alan?
Yeah, sort of following up Renee's questions had me think of this. These numbers, how much, I don't know how you would quantify it, but how much are these limited by dollars available or dollars proposed to be available as versus need? Or is this totally need or what?
This is what we need.
Okay.
There's no extra money in this. And I don't know that we need to spend more.
My question's the other way around. Yeah, well, maybe you just said it. Are there things that you left off these lists, because you didn't think the money would be available?
So the need to do the Columbia Gym hasn't changed, but the availability of funding has pushed that out a year or two. The need to do work at Fairway Hills was deferred. So, again, that's deferred improvements. It's not deferred maintenance. The roofs don't leak, the HVAC works correctly. Every unit has been replaced at the Columbia Gym now. Every HVAC is now less than 3 or 4 years old there. So it's deferred. We need to make the improvements to keep that facility relevant, but it's not deferred maintenance. So I'm not sure I'm not sure we need to look for more money.
Okay, thank you.
Milton?
Dennis, and not to put you on the spot, but I am going to. But I want you to define for the board, because it's part of our conversation, need versus want. Because as I said, one of my big things, and it's no secret, I'd rather see us deal with quality over quantity. And there's going to be a point when we're going to have to really be specific of what we're calling a need versus a want.
So to put it in, I think about it from my perspective, simple way to look at it. So I need a car, but I want a Tesla. But my car need is filled by a Corolla or, a Camry or something nice. So we need to keep the facilities structurally sound and watertight. And we may want to make upgrades and improvements, but what we need is to keep them. We need not to defer maintenance that would cost us more later down the road.
And also, one of the things in my conversation with Dennis, we were going to still focus. We were focused strongly on what's on the ground versus building anything new.
Correct.
Well, thank you, Dennis. Any other questions for Dennis? All right, thanks, Dennis. Good job. Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to the general plan update. Milton, anything you want to start with, or?
Kristen, I know that Kristen is out there. Kristen and possibly Jessica also.
Yep, this is Kristen. I am out here.
Kristen.
Hi. I just put a link in the chat for anybody who is interested. I am going to share my screen of that same link. So I just wanted to give you both options. Let's see here. Are you seeing a website?
Yes, scenario A.
Yep, great. So I am just going to give you the most recent progress made through HOCO by Design is called scenario planning. The consultants for Howard County produced 4 scenarios labeled A through D with different growth ideas and outcomes. I hope that most of you, or even all of you, have already explored this website, participated in a survey that was going on in March, and perhaps even participated in the virtual conversations that happened at the end of March. These were really great opportunities for the community to give feedback. Jessica and I both attended a public meeting just to kind of gauge the temperature of the feedback that the community was giving the county, which I thought was interesting. And then, of course, as a member of the Planning Advisory Council, I attended that meeting, which was quite similar to the community meetings, but went into a little bit more, a deeper conversation, let's say. I just want to give you the quick rundown on the 4 scenarios, and I encourage you, if you haven't already done so, to explore these in greater detail at your leisure. So scenario A, I will preface this by saying that the county assumes that regardless of the different scenarios, downtown Columbia will continue on the path that it's on. That is to say, it'll continue to experience the development that is already imagined for it. So none of the options that the community is considering will impact that or will change that course. So scenario A through D kind of goes from a low growth scenario incrementally increasing to a higher growth scenario, with scenario A being the lowest. It's basically the status quo. There will be no changes to Gateway, no new mixed use areas. As you can see on the map on the screen, downtown Columbia and Gateway are the red dots, but there's not much change beyond what we see now. But then we move up to scenario B, which does show some growth in existing activity center, and Gateway would become a new mixed use activity center. Route 1 would go through some changes to start some level of deindustrialization along that corridor. Columbia Village centers would increase as mixed use places, and the Snowden-Dobbin corridor would start to develop as a mixed use activity center. So in scenario B, the aspects that are most affect Columbia the most are Gateway becoming a new mixed use activity center, same with Columbia's village centers, and the Snowden-Dobbin corridor.
You mentioned Snowden-Dobbin a couple of times.
Yeah.
Kristen.
Yep.
Is that envisioned under Newtown, or is that envisioned to be done under not
Well,
Newtown?
bear in mind that this discussion is a planning and not a zoning discussion. So what we talk about and what the consultants and the county are looking for is what kind of places we want to see. How that is enacted with zoning would come later. So, so that hasn't been discussed at all and will not be.
Well, let me put it this way, is what, and if you can answer it, is what is being envisioned for that corridor under these growth scenarios possible under current zoning, or would it require zoning changes?
I would have to look at each of the FDPs, but I believe that it would require some zoning changes, because as far as I can think off the top of my head, a lot of those FDPs do not include a residential component. There may be some that do.
There's the magic key. Okay, I guess what I'm concerned about is inviting sprawl into our community. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, let's let Kristen finish just the other two scenarios, and then we'll go to questions.
Yep. Scenario C, again, envisions Gateway as being a regional mixed-use activity center, so even bigger than the prior two scenarios. Growth targeted along the MARC rail corridor, bus rapid transit, and re-subdivision shifted to urban centers, which currently, this isn't so much a Columbia thing, but in Howard County, people who currently live on large lots are already have the right to subdivide their lot into several smaller lots, and that's not always a popular activity. Neighbors often do not like it, and so this scenario would try to combat that, so to speak.
Kristen, your screen hasn't gone to scenario C.
It hasn't. Has it now?
No, at least for me, no, it's still on B.
No, still on B.
Huh. Jessica, are you out there, and can you try to
Maybe if you
help?
stop sharing it and then reshared.
Yeah, Kristen, I need you to stop sharing.
Sure. I'm going to have Jessica share her screen to try to help out here. Okay, so can you all see scenario C now?
Yes, got it.
Okay, great. So scenario C, which I've just described, has some more intense development, and you can see these corridors, which are kind of highlighted in yellow, calling your attention to areas of more development. And finally, scenario D is the highest growth scenario. I will note that as related to Columbia, Gateway would actually not be at the highest intensity. The highest intensity for Gateway is scenario C, but scenario D with Gateway anticipates the development of Gateway happening at a much faster pace. So you would experience change more intensely and abruptly, though ultimately it would not be as dense or as intense. Scenario D also has the moving of the PSA a bit west of Maple Lawn, and it has significant deindustrialization, particularly along Route 1. There was a lot of really great feedback from the community here, and ultimately what the county and the consultants are going to do is kind of inventory all of the feedback that they got from the surveys and the discussions, and it's possible and even likely that the scenario chosen will be a hybrid of some sort between these four scenarios. So if one element of scenario C was particularly popular, and another element of scenario D, for example, as long as those elements are not in conflict with one another or aren't bad planning when combined, the consultant intends to make a hybrid to best reflect the wishes of the community. Now, I want to let you all know that the moment we've all been waiting for is the Newtown charrettes, and I am constantly asking Howard County for updates on when this is going to happen. And Jessica, you can stop sharing the screen. And I am told that this is still planned for the end of April, which is really right around the corner. So I'm surprised myself that we don't have a date or dates, but I have still been assured that this is coming up at the end of April. And because it is still virtual, rather than being a 1 week type of intense charrette, cluster of charrettes. It's now anticipated to be several weeks, probably about 3 weeks. So hopefully that expands the number of people who are able to participate. Once I have dates, I will share it with you. I will share it with the villages. I will share it with our communications and marketing team so that we can really get the word out. But I can't encourage you strongly enough that we all need to be active in the Newtown Charrettes. Jessica and I certainly speak for Columbia Association when we're at these meetings, but obviously 10 voices are louder than 2, and this is your chance to really get involved. So so be prepared for that to be coming up right around the corner.
Okay, Kristen, we have a couple questions. Ginny, you're first, and then Dick, and then Milton.
Okay. 2 areas, Kristen. Very good presentation. One under B and one under C. Under B, some ADUs. For the benefit of maybe some people in the audience, you might want to explain what an what an ADU is, and also whether it's currently allowed or prohibited in Newtown. That's question 1. Then I'll go to question 2 when you finish with that, okay?
Sure, and that's a really good question because I have heard lots of confusion about what an ADU is. First, let me tell you what an ADU isn't. An ADU is not an accessory apartment. In Howard County, an accessory apartment is an apartment within the confines of your home. So you section off a corner of your house and you rent it out to whomever. An ADU would be a separate structure.
Mm-hmm.
For example, an apartment above a detached garage. For example, a pool house. Those are ADUs. They are presently not allowed anywhere in Howard County, NT or otherwise. As communities around the country face numerous challenges, including aging parents, Generation Z who doesn't have the financial ability to quite move out, and and the general idea of how the unaffordability of housing has made this an option that many communities are considering. And now Howard County is in that boat of considering this.
At some point, I'd like to understand, in terms of an ADU, like a separate building, and what that would mean in terms of the covenants and the architectural guidelines, how complex that would be for Newtown versus other areas. Then when we get to scenario C, re-subdivision, potential shifted to urban centers via density. What exactly does that mean in terms of, are we talking about somebody that has a half acre that could be divided, an acre that could be divided?
Yeah, so.
And does that apply to Newtown? Or let me ask it this way. If, in order to allow a lot of this to apply to Newtown, would they have to say that the zoning in Columbia will be the same as the county? And there will be no more Newtown, which includes percentages. Percentages would be eliminated as well.
Okay, there's a lot of questions in that question, so let me try to answer them. In other parts of the county, not so much in Newtown because the lots are comparably small in Newtown, but in other parts of the county where a single family home may be located on a 5-acre or whatever lot, where a 1-acre lot is all that is required. I'm just making up numbers here, but you get the point. That homeowner on the 5-acre lot may wish, for any number of reasons, to chop off the extra 4 acres and sell them, right? Now, they're allowed to do that right now.
Right.
That doesn't mean their neighbors like it. So what other communities have done, and there are multiple ways to do this, but say a developer in a more intensely developed community wishes to, how should I explain this? Say a developer in a more intensely developed community has a maximum density of 40 units, but they would really like to build 50. There could be a mechanism whereby they purchase those extra 4 lots from the guy out west, and then they actually build them in this other community. So they just bought 4 extra units, and now the property owner in the community out west got his money. The neighbors are happy because there's not 4 extra homes, and a community that is willing to see increased density achieves it. Now, the one side of that scenario, which is the selling off side, I don't see happening in Newtown because lots aren't big enough. The receiving side, I don't know if that would be possible in Newtown or not, because the mechanism has really not been worked out. And if it were proposed for Newtown, that would be a conversation that would happen at the time of the zoning rewrite, and we would certainly explore it and provide our input at that time, whether or not we think that it's favorable or not. There are other communities which may be willing to accept this sort of transfer as well. So I don't think it's necessarily targeted at Newtown. Though I will say that considering the future that is discussed for Gateway and the different scenarios that apply to Gateway, that may well be CA may well decide that that is an acceptable receiving zone, as opposed to, we're not talking about in the villages or in the more low-scale communities, but if Gateway were to become a mixed-use center, it might be worth contemplating that possibility.
Kristen, but the potential could be for the village centers to be receiving zone.
Everything is a potential.
Yeah, okay, okay. Yeah, and it also could be like with a 55-plus community where you normally would have had 8 houses, you get 15 or 20 or something like that. You get higher density. So, and that's
how it works, but all of these scenarios are so theoretical right now. I don't want to scare you.
No, you're not scaring me. I think the important thing is that people really understand the reality of what's happening. And this is a lot like the fee in lieu of, where a developer says, I don't want MIHUs or affordable housing in Maple Lawn, but I'm willing to give you the money to the county, and you can locate it elsewhere. It's the same concept. It's just a matter of a density trade.
Basically, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Dick, and then Milton.
Kristen, one thing that had me a little confused, you said that you cannot build ADUs anywhere in Howard County. If you've got 50 acres of land someplace, you can't put more than one structure on it. That doesn't, I'm not following that.
You're right. You can't.
So what if you got a farm? I mean, they put trailers out there for the staff. They have barns. I mean, what
well, a barn wouldn't be a residential unit.
Okay, so we're talking residential units. Yeah, well, what about the trailers that we've got out the horse center?
I would speculate that is, I mean, I don't know the exact zoning and development approval history of that, but it's not an accessory dwelling unit. It may be multifamily housing. may be qualified as multifamily housing. It may be qualified as mixed
So,
use.
if I can, real quick, so there aren't trailers on that site anymore. There are 2 modular homes that are allowed under the FDP.
Okay, thank you.
And up to 3 are allowed. We have 2.
Okay, thank you. That helps it. Now, going back, there's some words that scare me because I don't know what they mean. And when you start talking about the Snowden-Dobbin corridor, I'm having flashes of Route 40. I mean, what exactly do they mean by that? And when you say activity center, what is that? That sounds like a strip mall to me or something. What are we talking
No,
about?
it just means a mixed use center.
So describe that, define that.
It's where you would find residential and or office and or retail all kind of coexisting.
Okay, so it's mixed use, but it's not as urban, say, as downtown. Is that what you're telling me? It's more like a Wild Lake Village Center.
Yeah, I mean, these sort of things can happen at varying degrees of intensity, but it certainly does not necessitate mid-rise or high-rise development or the level of urbanism that you would see in downtown.
Now, the other thing is you mentioned the Newtown charrette. And when I think charrette, I'm thinking people bringing in big pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about?
Yeah.
So they would have illustrations of sample roads and developments and things.
I sure don't know what they're going to be presenting to you, but that's typically what a charrette is. You know, in an in-person charrette, there's going to be multiple stations in a room that people can walk around and comment on, and a lot of times it's an interactive type of experience. I don't know how they are going to translate that virtually, but I know that they've got something up their sleeve.
Uh-oh. That worries me. Anyway, no, that's good to know, because I was just trying to figure how they were gonna do a charrette, a traditional charrette. And there are a couple of things that just concern me through the whole thing, this whole process. And I know we're not in the zoning area yet, but I just hope that you and Jessica are keeping these in mind. And that is, I think the rest of the board feels the same way I do. We are really worried about losing the character of Columbia. And we get the feeling the county would just like to zone us like everybody else. And that really concerns us. And I just hope you guys are fighting to keep Columbia, Columbia. And it would be great if we had a Columbia district, sort of like Ellicott City has a district, historical Ellicott City, that would preserve kind of the basics of the Rouse vision. And I don't know if we're at that stage yet in this process, but I hope you are keeping that in mind.
Anything else, Dick?
That's it. I'm just sitting here listening.
Milton, and then we're going to have to wrap it up.
Yeah, I just have a quick question, Kristen. And there's 4 different scenarios. In other places I've been, when you're doing planning like this, they have scenarios, but there's usually a population max tied to each one of the scenarios. Do any of those scenarios have a population max for Howard County?
There is. Let me see if I can quickly try to find where that is.
Well, you don't have to show it, but I just wanted to know whether there was a consideration of a population max for the county.
So as I recall, there is a range of population expectations from the low end to the high end. from scenario A through scenario D. I do not remember the numbers, and I'm not going to be able to find it in the next 15 seconds.
No, as I said, as long as it's consideration, because you just need, when you're going through a redevelopment, especially, I just think you need to focus on a population max, because there is going to be a point, if you just keep growing, it's just going to stress your infrastructure, where the quality of life is going to be impacted.
Yeah, and that's one of the challenges that I think a lot of people faced with the scenario planning survey, because it asks, would you rather it gives two choices. Would you rather A or B? And people had a hard time answering, well, I don't want to get rid of industry because it's such a great tax base, but I don't want industry because it's ugly. Well, yeah, that's what the consultant is trying to show the public, that there are trade-offs, and you may want a tax base of the industrial tax base, but you also want things to be aesthetic. So. Right. And the same thing goes with the population. If you want to have a stagnant population, there are trade-offs for that. If you're not going to build enough housing, if you're not going to build more housing, the price of housing is going to be exclusionary because of supply and demand issues. But if you build more housing, the population's going to inherently grow. So it's an exercise in showing the public that there are a lot of trade-offs, and it's not easy to say, well, I want A, but not the burdens that come along with it. So yeah, somewhere on this website are population projections, and through the exercise, we're all learning the give and take that is involved in growing or not growing.
Got it.
Kristen, it seemed in here that scenario C was getting a little extra weight. Is that where they were trying to send us?
I don't think they're trying to send us anywhere. I will say that in the session that I attended, which was just the general public, not the planning no, I'm not talking about the planning advisory group, just random people from the public. It felt like a lot of people preferred scenario C. I don't really think that the consultant particularly cares what people pick.
Well, you did say they were trying to show us the trade-offs, and somehow as I was reading through that thing, I got a strong feeling that somebody was putting their thumb on the scale for scenario C. But maybe it's just because I liked it so much. Who knows?
Well, I certainly encourage each of you to engage in the process, and if you like scenario C or you like scenario A or whatever other scenarios, please make your voice heard, because like I said, Jessica and I are 2 voices, but you guys are 10 more. So.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. We're gonna have to wrap it up here.
Okay.
Jen, you got a real quick question.
Yeah, thanks. Kristen, are there any plans for the remaining industrial parks like Oak Ridge, Guilford? These are serious problems occurring there as to what is allowed, what isn't allowed, et cetera. You know, along 108 and along 32, those industrial parks, for example. Employment.
I'm not sure what the problems are that you're referring to.
No, but I mean, are there any plans here to address how that will be redeveloped? They're pretty old. There's lack of covenant enforcement or planning in them right now. They don't come under the village centers covenants or CA. So, are there any plans for how those will be redeveloped?
I would say that short of them becoming activity centers, that would need to be handled in the rezoning process.
Okay, thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Jessica. We're going to move on now to stream restoration, easement request. Milton, you want to say anything?
Dennis has already teed it up.
Okay,
So
Dennis, you're
I have a few quick slides. This is the wetland studies stream work that goes basically from Lake Elkhorn out through Longreach to 108, and the board has already approved a segment of that that goes. So this is the entire project area from Lake Elkhorn through Longreach to High Tor, almost to 108. The approved portion, previously approved, is highlighted here. There's a portion of this that is in Oakland Mills that John McCoy went to Owen Brown, to the Owen Brown Village Board meeting on Tuesday night. I think you were there, Andy, as well. Yeah. But this is the remainder of that proposed stream improvement area under which Wetland Studies would like to have an easement so they can move this forward. And with that in mind, I would open it up to any questions.
Odessa, just wanted to say that John and company did a good presentation at the Owen Brown Village Board. And he was able to answer their questions. Any questions on the easement? If not, we're going to put it, it's going to be on our meeting on the April 22nd for a vote. And if nobody has any objections, we'll put it on the consent agenda. Any objections?
I just have one question. So Dennis, is that that's part of the easement of the stream restoration that we discussed about in Longreach previously?
Yes, it is.
And so will it be subject to the same sort of, I just want to make sure that within CA and within the watershed committee that there's some review of what's happening?
Absolutely. The same conditions that apply to the first portion will apply to this portion as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, Dennis, you might as well continue.
Okay, so let's share my screen again. And I've got 5 minutes, so I'm trying not to go too quickly, but we did another bridge replacement. There's the before and after pictures. This is some, I guess, watershed management erosion work that we did adjacent to Great Star Drive tot lot. And it's a relatively small project, but the small projects all together add up to a major result. The before and after picture, another small project, but before and after, I think the sign is certainly much better looking in the after picture. So I talked about the tot lot refurbishment of Star Path. This is in Owen Brown, and in the background you can see the Rascal, which is the metal plate structure. I would encourage you, if you have time, to go out and look at it in person. It's actually bigger in person. It really looks terrific. I walked down there, and the metal swing on the left had been replaced a while back. It looks exactly like what I think our tot lots should look like. And I was out there earlier in the week, and there were kids climbing all over the Rascal. It was absolutely what I thought should happen. I didn't see anyone on the picnic bench, and they got a bench, picnic bench, the Rascal, the swings, and the spring animals. It really looks good. It was, we spent $56,000 on this one, which is significantly less than we would have spent if we had put a wooden play structure in. And it really looks good. If you get a chance to go out and look at it in person, it's at the end of Star Path. We did some work at Lake Elkhorn. I think the pathway renovation work there. A small job, we replaced the fence at Jeffers Hill. Hot tub work at the athletic club. Interior painting at Linden Hall. New fence at the Dickinson Pool. Invasive grasses were removed at the Wild Lake Boathouse. Sign bed work as we're getting into spring. Live staking was done. You can see that in the upper left and the bottom right. The stream waders event in Oakland Mills, which was terrific to see, and I love the picture in the bottom right. And so these are real people in this video. You know, they say that before. This is not an advertising piece, but this is the people that are getting ready this spring to keep the Columbia open space looking good.
Check air pressure, just check everything. The guys don't want to go out with the motors and have to bring them back a week later when they have to be fixed. Mainly it's just do a good safety inspection on it and do everything that it needs to have done so the guys are safe. And everybody needs to go home in the evening.
I'm Ray Somerville. I'm the crew supervisor for Harper's Choice Hickory Ridge. For the spring prep for us, we go to the village signs. We prep them for the spring flowers. Part of that prep, we edge out the border of it. We till up the existing mulch and the soil together to make it less compact, loosen it up so it's easier to plant when we go to plant the flowers. Also, part of our spring prep, we prepare the pools, the beds for the pools for the summer. One other thing we also do prep-wise is we change our equipment from plow equipment to actual mowing equipment, where we take the attachments off of all the mowers and we take the plates off, and then the mower decks go right onto the mower itself.
Today we're going to be doing a little bit of spring cleanup here at Kennedy Gardens. What we're going to do is we're going to trim down some of the hypericum that's showing its brown golden color, and then we'll be raking it up so the fresh shoots can come forward.
What we do to get ready for spring is we refresh all the mulch, make sure it's all the right height and the right depth. And what we're doing now is we're putting in a new fort because they're getting rid of the wooden forts because they don't last as long. So we're putting in new metal forts that'll last a lot longer. So that's pretty much what we do in the springtime, and then we do repairs if it needs a repair done.
This particular plot is being renovated in conjunction with Howard County. Howard County has a Bee City project. We actually have some grant money that we are using together to do this new bed and also a bed at Lake Elkhorn. We plan on planting this bed, and Howard County plans on using some volunteers to plant Lake Elkhorn.
This is what we do for spring, getting ready to hook up the boat, make sure that the hoses, the oil, everything working properly, no checking from knots and hoses and everything that we need to be doing so we don't have any problem once in the water. So we do all the maintenance here in the land before we take into the water.
Thanks, Dennis. Alan, you had a question?
Yeah, a couple of questions, thanks. The hot tub at the athletic club, was that replaced when the athletic club had its renovation, or was this an old thing that's now in need of repair? Your mute's working great, Dennis.
It's a new hot tub that needed work. It's not. It was part of the renovation.
So did we learn anything from why a new hot tub all of a sudden needs work? I don't need to know what we learned, but
sometimes I'm going to say this the wrong way. Sometimes bad things happen, and even if you put it in the best way possible, sometimes it doesn't work out the way you want it to.
Okay. And I know we've had this conversation before. It's a small thing, but there was mention of spring flowers. We had talked before about the possibility of doing more perennials rather than replanting every spring. What's the status of that?
So we do more perennials, but we don't have them all turned. They haven't all been converted to perennials, but we do more perennials. And we've actually, I hesitate to say this because no one has noticed, but there have been a couple cases where what we call them high-risk planter beds, where we've taken a couple out of service because they're difficult for our guys to get to. So we have reduced maintenance.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. Appreciate it. And
thank you.
We're going to move on. Wrap up of state legislation. Milton?
Well, basically, we provided you, Sherry provided you in a memo. So basically, are there any questions? And I know that Sherry's out there, so I saw her pop up on the screen at one point.
I'm here. So Sherry, anything you want to add? Or?
Not really, not unless somebody has questions.
Any questions regarding the wrap up there?
I think the General Assembly, it ends next Tuesday, the 12th?
Yes, it ends on the 12th. Oh, one thing I did want to note, the legislation that you had asked us to send a letter of support on regarding the electric vehicle charging stations passed both houses, and it's awaiting the governor's signature.
Okay, good. Alan?
Yeah, thanks. Just a small thing, but I owe it to a resident who pointed out to me their belief that the county bill on the plastic straws and stirs, our memo says it goes into effect May 2nd. Apparently, the operative provisions don't go into effect until January 1st of next year.
Okay, I'll check on it.
Thanks.
Any other questions? No? Thank you, Sherry.
No problem.
Okay, we're on to fiscal year 2021 budget update questions. There was a memo sent out. Milton, Susan, anything you want to just say quickly? Or?
Susan, can they add anything?
No, we had such a robust discussion of the results through January at the audit committee meeting, and that I don't really have anything to add at this point.
The only thing I would add that this is we can call this our pandemic fiscal year. We only have 2 months left in it.
Nancy.
Yeah, I'm just wondering when we're talking about, is it in 2 weeks when we vote on the reserve fund for the villages?
No, the village, that's going to go into next fiscal year because we're just meeting with the village managers on Wednesday, the 14th.
Oh, they were hoping it would be sooner because they have budgets they've prepared, but without knowing about the reserve fund, which makes it.
Yeah, I don't think we can get it done by then. I would be shocked if we could get that wrapped up by then. So we do know that we're paying the rest of the contingency fund will be paid out in April this month. And there will be that increase to them based on the annual charge coming in greater than we thought. The total is $279,000. I don't have the breakout by village yet. So there will be those two little bonus amounts as well.
So we don't have to approve that?
It's up to you. I felt that you gave us that direction, so we were moving forward.
But that wasn't the budgeted amount.
Correct. Right.
So we have to approve that at the next meeting.
You could approve that at the next meeting, yeah.
Okay. So,
and if I'm Nancy, in your question, any request for the villages to whatever in their reserve funds, Susan, help me. I think that wouldn't impact. That would only go. That would be FY22 anyway. It wouldn't be FY21. So their request would be for 22, not for 21.
The request is for the FY21 reserves, but they won't know until June or July what those are. So when they do their financials, so it's in FY22 that will be what will be determined. So I'm not sure what you were asking, but those are the dates.
Renee? Or-
So I'm, all right, so the village portion of the assessments is going to be for this year. And the contingency fund's going to be paid out for this year.
Correct.
Okay, so if we do that without making a motion to allow the villages to keep that as part of their reserve account, then all it's going to do is force them to pay it back again in May or June.
Well, no, it would be much later than that, and the contingency fund's already excluded.
Okay, so, but still the additional, whatever portion of the 279 that each village gets, they would have to spend it right away. Because our expenses shrunk so much because we were closed for so long. So in other words, instead of being able to use that money for 2022 to ramp up, they could be forced to pay it back.
Well, I think you're going to vote on that in before that happens. So we're not there at this point.
No, but the end of at the end of the year is April 30th.
Right, and so when they do their April 30 balance sheet, they'll know exactly what their excess cash is, right?
Right, that's my point, but I don't want to approve money going to the villages and then us turn around 2 months later and say, oh, we made a mistake, give it back.
I don't think it would be a mistake.
Okay,
right?
We approve money and now we want it back. I mean, that's a great way actually that you could fund the pools, give the villages all the money and then take it all back.
Well, it wouldn't be enough if it's the 279 that you're talking about.
No, but you could give them more.
I'm not following you, I'm sorry.
Well, instead, we'll have that discussion later. It's a brainstorm. Okay, thank you.
Right, we'll definitely have that discussion later.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, move on to discussion of the development tracker. Milton, anything you want to start with, or?
I know Jessica is out there.
Jessica?
Hi, everyone. I think on your agenda, you wanted to leave it at questions only, so I can move straight to questions.
So are there any questions for?
So yeah, Jessica, we just got a notice about a new age-restricted property going in by Clarksville Middle School. Have you heard anything about it?
That has not come on my radar yet, so it could be that they have not yet filed for a pre-submission community meeting. I don't know if that's going straight to your village. A lot of times developers reach out to the village managers first before it comes on our radar. So you probably are on the front lines of that, but we'll keep a lookout.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Jessica, where are they at with the Erickson?
So Erickson is continuing. I had the joy of sitting through that last night. And it will be, I think the next meeting for Erickson is scheduled for the 14th, so next week. And they're kind of clipping along there because Hickory Ridge has now moved to their deliberations. And so they're scheduling that during the day, which has freed up more of their night meetings for getting through Erickson quicker.
Any other questions for Jessica? Dick? Dick, you're muted.
Muted.
Sorry, I was over by Symphony Woods, and says there's a public hearing, and I'm having trouble reading. Oh, here it says BA 777D 10. A little. I'm having trouble reading my photo here. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, that's CA's appeal of DPC's decision related to the temporary use for the Symphony of Lights.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions for Jessica? I don't see any. All right, thank you, Jessica. Appreciate it. Good report again. On to chairman's remarks. Saul submitted any questions for me? All right, on to President's remarks. Milton, anything you want to add or say?
No, if you are eligible for your vaccine, please get them.
Proposed new topics, anything? No? All right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. And it's 8:50 and we're going to adjourn the meeting since we're done with the agenda. So have a great weekend, everyone. Good night. We're adjourned.